1 hour down, 3 to go. Great stuff so far, and it's going to continue here with the one, the only Sean Cunningham, reporter for Fox 40. Sean, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Oh, no sweat. How are you guys doing this fine, cold morning?
Good. It's been hot in here. I had some takes, Sean, and I know, you'll talk Giants, you'll talk Niners. Just real quick, I couldn't do all of the victory lapping from some Niners fans with the Sam Darnold thing. I don't know if you saw somebody, it was Brian Baldinger. He had said, would you think about Sam Darnold at $20 million less instead of Brock Purdy? And now people are just victory. It's just so much, Sean. Well, you're at home, and you guys are trying to say that Brock was one of those guys. There was no Sam Darnold comparison. Enough. Come on.
So much of prisoner of the moment syndrome just happens to so many fans out there. And look, I think the oftentimes you'll see the quiet minority tends to get louder on depending upon what's happening. So if you crowdsource through social media, it's the worst place to crowdsource because all of a sudden those people get noisy and it really isn't a true test of your fan base. So I think they just that they get a little bit noisier and people start to give it attention. And I think if you polled 49er fans, they'd probably laugh you in the face and say, if you were to say anything at the notion of Sam Darnold over Brock Purdy.
Yeah, well, that's me, Sean. I am that guy crowdsourcing because I can't help it, man. I get caught up in this stuff, and you just got to rock and roll from there. Well, speaking of rock and rolling, Sean, that's exactly what the Kings have been doing. For you, what's the most impressive part of this win streak?
The fact that it happened on the heels of a 6-game losing streak. I mean, you're talking like in 12, 13 days, something like that. They were able to absolutely erase it and get back to a winning streak and make themselves relevant again. That to me is quite impressive. It also kind of shows, in my mind, really just because I mean, you look at the numbers, man, like being second during the stretch in defensive rating and up to 6th is kind of you've been around 8th all season long in offensive rating, and you're able to score the basketball, but clearly some shots haven't fallen, but you're showing a give a damn. Like this team is showing a inspired play and basketball and motivation, and however that happens, and maybe a firing of Mike Brown is the ultimate wake-up call. But I think the messaging, this isn't a guy that came in off the street. I mean, Doug Christie's been there. They know what he's about.
Yeah.
Seeing the players kind of buy into some things that could be considered corny, but I mean, you played baseball, I played baseball. I mean, you take momentum wherever you can get it. You take motivation wherever you can get it. And so I think that's what's happening right now. They're playing inspired again. They have a belief in one another. It takes sometimes a couple wins to do that. And look, you can't control who your opposition is, but it came at the expense of some teams that were kind of reeling at the time. So you find that slump buster wherever you can find it. And now you're turning that slump buster into actually meaningful games where you're out there beating the likes of the defending champions who were, albeit scuffling a little bit. They had lost, they were 500 in their last 10 coming into that game. But we know this team has had a knack for playing well on the road. Here they are looking for a sweep as they head into Milwaukee without Malik Monk.
Talking to Sean Cunningham, sports reporter for Fox 40. Speaking of what we've been seeing, Sean, and you just mentioned, the Niners and obviously the Giants. So that Giants 107 win season, I believe they had the most pinch hit home runs in franchise history, something insane like that. And I kept saying, I just don't think this is sustainable. This is not something that's you can lean on in the playoffs. And it wasn't. When you look at this 7-game winning streak for the Kings, how much of it seems to be sustainable to you? Because their numbers are great, but it's not like you have, Keegan dropped 50 this game and now Malik dropped 60 this game. How much of it seems sustainable? They're not going to win every game, but how much of what they're doing seems sustainable to you?
I think there is sustainability with this group in terms of the effort they put forth, and especially on the defensive end. I mean, you've seen the likes of Keon Ellis really step up, especially when he's in the starting rotation. But even when he's not, he's still you know what you're getting from him from a defensive standpoint.
Mhm.
Trey Lyles is playing really well in this stretch. I mean, I don't give a damn what Trey Lyles does offensively, and oftentimes when he struggles to shoot the ball, sometimes the rebounding isn't there, sometimes the physicality isn't there. He's kept his foot on the gas, and that's been a good thing. I think he's also, put in some numbers off the bench offensively as well, which has been nice to see too. So I do think that's sustainable. But to your point, I think there is a moment where you say, you've had 3 of these games without DeAaron Fox, and I think that provides opportunities for other guys. Sometimes that can be a little hard to scout because you're looking at when you're, getting ready to play the Kings, you're worried about
Right.
really 2 guys, Domantas Sabonis and DeAaron Fox. And when you don't have one of those guys, it does change things a little bit. So you use that to your advantage. But I do feel that there is sustainability. I do feel there's also still a roster imbalance.
Mhm.
I think playing small almost you kind of embrace what you're good at, right? Like you struggle against teams that are these long, athletic, physical teams. But if you can be a team, okay, you're just driving it. You're just going to totally steer right into that. We're a smaller team, and we're going to go out there and maybe we're not physical, but we can certainly be annoying and try to muck up
Right.
a game. And who knows that better than Doug Christie? And then you can play with a little bit of confidence or a little swagger. I think that can go a long way. So you look, they can't control who's going to walk through that door. That's only Monty McNair and this ownership group. So what they have in that room, and clearly they're running a 7-game win streak into Milwaukee. So I feel like they can only control what they can control, and they're doing that. So
Mhm.
sustainability, yeah, I think there is moments of it, but to the broader scope of things, I think they still have the same problems that they had during the 6-game skid. I think the only thing that's different is they've been inspired. They're playing inspired basketball.
Yeah, it reminds me of this quote that a lot of fans did not like from Monty McNair when he was asked about the length and dealing with the Pelicans, and he said, "Well, we did get a couple guys," and he mentioned Jalen McDaniels, but then he also said, "And these other teams have to, adapt to how we play and what we do." Under Mike Brown, especially after last season, and they weren't really shooting the basketball well. I think we all looked around thinking, well, what does that even mean? What are they adapting to? Now it feels like there is something that other teams have to adapt to, the physicality, and just we're not going to get pushed around. So I do think that there is more of that now. But with that being said, and speaking of Monty McNair, how are you looking at the trade landscape now? Is it still a couple first rounders and Trey Lyles, who, like you said, have been playing well, and Kevin Herter for Cam Johnson? Are you more so now looking at around the edges and maybe a move? I mentioned a Larry Nance Jr. How are you looking at this trade situation as the deadline approaches, and how do you think the Kings front office is looking at it? Because they went from underachieving really bad to now, I think, overachieving. So what is it exactly that the Kings need?
Yeah, I don't know if the front office is looking at this stretch and saying, this changes our calculus in terms of
Mm-hmm.
what they want to achieve in the trade market. Certainly it takes 2 to tango and sometimes 3 in the trade landscape of
Mm-hmm.
things. But you've known for quite some time at least who you're willing to part with. I think you have market research in terms of who you're not willing to part with, but what the market value is. And I think they're having absolute conversations about both the short term and the long term success of this team and where they see it going, and ultimately addressing some of the needs. I don't think that changes with a 7-game win streak. I think they absolutely go into it looking to make this roster better. But that being said, like, I think a lot of teams were looking at. I think what changes in the landscape of things is not how the Kings look at the trade market, but how the league looks at the Kings. Because when you're in the midst of firing your head coach and you're down 6 in a 6-game losing streak, I think everybody looks at where you are in the standings and go, Sacramento is acting out of desperation. They're going to look for anything to either save their season, or they're just going to completely, fold up shop
Mm-hmm.
and it is what it is, and maybe try to hold on to that pick. I think now this streak does make the league look at the Kings a little bit differently and realize that no, they're not going to be acting out of desperation. They're still going to do their due diligence on everything, but the market does change based off the success for Sacramento and maybe the way that they think that they might be able to bend them over a barrel. I don't think that's going to be the case right now. So you could make the argument, and I've heard plenty of people do this, that this should make the Kings even more desperate to make a move. But I think, look, the Kings have shown the ability that they can win. They've shown the ability that they can also be a very bad basketball team when it's not going well. So the one thing that they know that their bread is buttered on is on the offensive end. How do you sustain the defensive side of things? They're clearly needing size and physicality and some help for Domantas Sabonis in the worst way. But then there's the argument beyond that, like, do you still build around Fox? Do you still build around Sabonis and those questions? And I think some of those things get a little bit louder, more so towards the end of the season than they will right now. But I think what's going to be interesting, though, to wrap up the point there, is just how the league looks at Sacramento right at this moment.
Sean, one more for you, and you mentioned his name, so we'll just go right into it. We had Sam Amick on the station last week, and he mentioned feeling like the writing is on the wall unless the Kings make a deep playoff run as far as DeAaron Fox is concerned. Are you hearing anything about the DeAaron Fox thing? I know there was a team dinner, I think I saw, and there was, DeAaron couldn't make it, but his family was there, and he had the picture with Mike Brown last week, and obviously he hadn't played the last couple games they won. I was so glad that the Bulls did not beat the Kings without DeAaron, or with DeAaron Fox, because that would have been a bunch of fans saying we don't need DeAaron Fox, and even though I get that anyway. But are you hearing anything about DeAaron Fox, or has it gotten a little quiet and maybe just towards the end of the year, or once we get into the offseason, it'll heat back up again?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, there's certainly a lot of internet chatter out there, and you've got speculation, and I know a lot of people throughout the league will talk about, wow, hey, Miami, hey, the Lakers, could be landing spots for DeAaron Fox if things don't go well in Sacramento. And certainly some of the comments that were made, not only on Draymond Green's podcast, but even into the media before that, in terms about his own future in Sacramento, they're hard to ignore. But at the end of the day, like, he did what's in the best interest for himself. Everyone's going to expect him to do that, which is to go out there, see if you can make the All-NBA team, and all of a sudden boost your max rating up to, like a super max. And I don't fault him for doing that. I think when you've been to someplace 8 years, you start to look around, and this team hasn't been out of the first round. I think he's just as culpable as the organization is in that, because he kind of controls his own destiny, and they've got him help. So you'd like to see maybe a little bit more help, but now when you're firing the head coach, you're certainly maybe dipping a toe in what it looks like without DeAaron Fox. But I don't hear anything in terms of the Kings' interest in trying to part with him. But you'll hear a lot of speculation over the next really 6 months to a year about what DeAaron Fox's future is in Sacramento and where he goes and what team he fits best with. The Lakers one kind of it amuses me a little bit, because the Sacramento Kings have never made a trade with the Lakers, and the one that they almost did famously fell through. And the Buddy Hield, Kyle Kuzma package. So
right,
and if you're just playing a GM on your couch, why would you trade De'Aaron Fox as your centerpiece within your division, let alone your conference? So that doesn't seem, if he ends up in the Lakers, that's as way of a free agent. I just don't see that happening. So I don't think people really have much to worry about when it comes to De'Aaron Fox's future, at least for a little while. I mean, just get through this season, right?
That's right. Sean Cunningham, Fox 40 sports reporter. Sean, before we let you go, is there a world where the Kings don't make a move? Do you see that as a possibility?
Absolutely. I mean, they've done it. We've seen it before. Everyone thinks that they're going to make a move, and that's what it is. It takes two to tango, and to see guys, 2 years ago when they're end up third in the West, and they're looking to maybe bolster their rotation like a baseball team would, gearing up for the postseason, going out and maybe finding the likes of we heard Mason Plumlee's name thrown out. You saw how many first or second round picks it took to get him. I think that they value some of those things a little bit more than maybe people think that they do. And just to go out to get a guy as a rental for 25 games and then see whatever happens in the postseason, sacrificing some of that success to see what that looks like. Or some of that future for that minimal amount of success, maybe. But yeah, I think there's moves that they'd like to make, but it takes two to tango. And if they can go out and find one of those moves, then absolutely. But be prepared for them not to make a move, because that's happened before.
Sean Cunningham, thank you so much. Go check out all of Sean's work, Fox Sports 40. Also, check out Sean on social media. Great follow. Always informed, all things Kings and Giants as well. Sean, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Allen. Take care, man. Thanks.
That was Sean Cunningham. On the other side, Malik Monk out tonight. How did the Kings get it done? Let's open back up the phone lines. How you feeling, Sacramento? 916-339-1140. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.